So you decided to start a podcast, or maybe, just maybe, you already have a podcast and you're wrestling with this question. Should you focus on a solo podcast where it's you and just a microphone, or should you focus on a interview-based show where you invite guests onto your podcast? Now, while this seems like a simple choice, it's one that could drastically impact your show's trajectory and your show's ability to generate revenue for your business. Now, yes, I know it sounds super dramatic, but this can be the make or break on whether or not you have an easy time growing and monetizing, or whether it's going to be an uphill battle you can't seem to win. Now, the uncomfortable truth is most podcasters make this decision based on kind of their personal comfort level. They see what others are doing, and rather than thinking about what strategically makes most sense for themselves and their business goals, they kind of just copy what other people are doing, which then sabotages their show's ability to grow way faster and to make more money. So today I'm going to break down the specific pros and cons for both formats based on data after analyzing hundreds of business-driven podcasts, meaning from podcasters who use the podcast primarily as a business asset. So if you have been unsure about what direction to take, or just curious about whether or not it's time for you to jump ship to the other side, I believe this video will give you the clarity you need to come to that decision. Let's dive straight in. So here are the strengths when it comes to solo podcasts. Well, number one, you have complete control of the message, right? There's no distraction from your core message. If you have a podcast and there's a specific type of tone and message you want to be shared on the show, you have full control over that with a solo show. If you have a guest onto your podcast and they just ramble a bunch of nonsense, you don't get to control the core message of what they're trying to share. Whereas with a solo show, it's entirely up to you. The second piece is your ability to stay precisely on topic. So let's say, for example, you have a very clear content strategy for your podcast, simply meaning you have specific topics you cover on the show. When it's just you on a solo podcast, it's just you talking. You can say exactly what you want. You're not relying on a guest to hopefully, produce good content. And another strength is the fact that there's a much more seamless alignment with your offers as well as your calls to action. So if you focus on a specific topic for an episode and you're the person giving value, right? And you're talking all about, let's say, anxiety. You get to end the episode and you mention, hey, I help people one-on-one live anxiety-free with my 90-day coaching program. There's a perfect alignment and you're the person who's positioned as the expert. So your listeners taking that call to action just feels very natural. With a guest, it doesn't feel the same. And this leads us to the next point, right? There's a much higher listener to lead conversion due to that business alignment. So it's quite obvious when you really think about this on a deeper level. Imagine you go to a conference again, that's all about anxiety. Just play along with me, right? And you get to this conference, then there's a host and there's a guest speaker. The host introduces, let's say, Fernando, right? That's the name of the guy, Fernando. Fernando comes on stage and he shares this riveting story. Everyone's up their feet, they're applauding towards the end. And he shares a story about how he went from being someone who was, had crippling anxiety to the point where every single time he would leave to go to a social event, he would literally violently vomit in his bathroom. Again, I know it might be a bit visceral, just go along with me, right? The point is, yes, crippling anxiety. And eventually he goes through this transformation. He heals his anxiety completely to the point where he's now talking on stage to a crowd of tens of thousands of people. And he walks off stage confidently without having any anxiety at all. And now he's living anxiety free. Let's just say he says that. Everyone stands up, you go crazy. You're like, oh my God, Fernando, I love him, right? Everyone loves Fernando. And he shares again all of his insights, his story. He shows you his process, his methodology, and how he gained that through his experience. And then at the end, of course, Fernando walks off stage, they clap him off, and a random host just comes on stage and says, oh, by the way, guys, I have a personal development program about anxiety. If you guys want me to help you out with that as well, visit my website, personaldevelopment.com. You'd all be like, what the hell? You'd be raging. Get me back. Where's Fernando? Give me back Fernando. Fernando's awesome. I want to work with that guy, right? Well, that's exactly what happens when podcasters, entrepreneurs, experts have an interview-based show where they put the spotlight on their guest. The guest shares incredible value, incredible story, incredible insights for, let's say, an hour. And then all of a sudden you expect your listeners and your audience to buy from the host when you give a call to action at the end. It just feels very disconnected. So the conversion rate of a listener into a lead into your funnel I'm pointing, I'm sorry, that feels kind of rude. But into your funnel is unlikely when it's you putting a spotlight on the guest, them providing the value. But when it's you providing the value and there's a clear alignment between your podcast content and what your podcast is about and your business offering, your listeners are seeing you as authority, you're showing your expertise. So working with you is just like a very straightforward line. So like I mentioned, just much higher conversions when it comes to making sales, booking calls, slinging deals, all that kind of stuff, right? Because based on our data, our clients always get much better and higher conversions when it comes to solo podcasts versus interview shows. And the reason is simple, right? You can directly showcase your expertise and your methodologies on your episodes. There's a more natural product to service mention because again, it's you talking about your products and services rather than just your guests talking about their stuff. There's direct relationship building where you're the person who's a source of value. And then finally, it's just easier integration into your sales funnel because again, you're in complete control of the episode, what's talked about on the content, and the alignment between what you talk about on the show versus what your back end offer is that you're trying to sell people. Another benefit is really when it comes to production flexibility. There's no scheduling dependency between you and another guest, which by the way, can be super frustrating. If you haven't got a team and it's just you, and you have to sort out a time with the guest, make sure the guest actually shows up, make sure to then provide really good value, then do your interview, which is again, is fine. There's pros to it as well, like we'll see in just a moment. Then you edit it, then you launch the episode. And if you're any good, you actually let your guests know, every guest you have on every week, you let them know when a new episode is being pushed out. So it can be a lot. Whereas with a solo episode, you haven't got to worry about the scheduling piece. And of course, with solo episodes as well, you can just produce way more at a way faster rate with way more ease. It's not just you and a guest for an hour talking to create one episode. It can just be you and yourself and this bloody thing right here. And you can record, let's say in an hour, I can record, let's say 2 to 3 decent episodes in an hour. That's more than enough, right? And then finally, part of your strategy is covering timely content, which by the way, is a fantastic way of growing your audience because let's say a news pops up and it's big in your industry right now. There's going to be a ton of search going on to that topic. So if you can quickly, target that keyword and that topic on your podcast and cover it quickly in a timely fashion, you'll tap into a new audience who wouldn't have found you otherwise. So using tapping into timely content and topics within the industry is way easier. But of course, it doesn't come with some challenges. So some challenges can simply be, content creation burden, feeling like you have full responsibility of sharing valuable insights, which again, if you're an expert and entrepreneur, this shouldn't be that much of a challenge, but some people feel it. So I think it's worth mentioning. You might have the worry that there's going to be potential topic fatigue. Hey, look, if I talk about the same thing over and over again, won't I get bored? Won't I just run out of things to talk about? Now, this is a hurdle that a lot of my clients who we work with one-on-one in our academy, the Get More Listeners Academy, which is our personalized one-on-one growth and monetization program for experts and entrepreneurs who want to grow a podcast that builds their personal brand and attracts dream clients to their business. Anyways, slight plug there. The point is, this is a hurdle that a lot of people face when they're just starting to kind of flirt and play around with solo episodes is hey, what if I just run out of content? And whilst I understand the concern, because again, it's just you, if you're covering a specific topic, you think you might get bored. Honestly, as soon as you get started, so many more ideas will come to you, whether that's from your own experience, whether that's you sharing an insight from a coaching session you have with another client, whether that's just you starting an episode about one topic, going off on a mini tangent and realizing, wait, hang on a second, that's an incredible episode, which by the way happens to me and my co-host Tig all the time. So again, I get the concern, but once you get started and the ball rolling, it becomes way easier to create new content. You really don't run out of ideas. You can always just go back, rehash things, explore things in a deeper level as your expertise deepens as well. And then finally, to some degree, high preparation requirements, because if it's just you, you're not just relying on just interviewing someone else and they provide all the value. And it's you got to prep sometimes, maybe your outline, maybe your script, maybe just making sure you're in the right headspace. Whereas with an interview, you can just rock up, have a good conversation. That's the content, give or take, not always. Still got to do some prep for the guests, of course. But the point is there can be higher prep with certain episodes if you don't have the right systems. Another challenge that some people might face is limited perspective and diversity. You might risk putting yourself in an echo chamber effect where it's just you talking on the show, missing complementary viewpoints. You might be missed out on getting other people's perspective on the topic you cover on your show. And then finally, potential voice fatigue. Again, these are worries and concerns and challenges that some people face. I personally, my clients don't experience this, but these might be concerns that you have. And I want to let you know that these are kind of just things and problems that we kind of, to somewhat degree, create without starting the thing. Like potential audience voice fatigue. Like your voice is going to evolve. You're going to keep getting better and better. You're going to constantly be improving. And your show will naturally change. Your sort of episode will naturally change. It doesn't need to be the same format. You can constantly evolve things. If you do stay stale, that's in your control, realistically. Like that's you choosing to stay stale. You can always switch things up if you find that things are getting stale. Sometimes that happens. We switch up our content all the time. There's nothing wrong with that. And then I'm going to say, quote unquote, a lot of people have the perception that if you start, let's say, a solo podcast, that you might have slower growth because there's no built-in promotion with you and a guest. If you get a guest on, they've got a big audience. They've got, let's say, 100,000 followers on Instagram. The hope is that they bring in some of their audience by promoting your podcast to their audience. That's the hope. That's really the hope. But whether or not that happens or not, more times than not, your guest just doesn't promote anyways. But again, these are concerns people have. Missed out on networking opportunities. I mean, this one is definitely real and true. Like you won't network with as many people if you have a solid podcast primarily. And then finally, limited access to external credibility. So like you can't really status signal by getting high profile guests onto your podcast if you have solely a solo based podcast because it's just you. And unless you already have status, then you can't really signal like, hey, I've got this guy, he's massive in our industry. He's now on my podcast. Check me out. This is awesome, right? Now check out my podcast. It doesn't quite work the same. So yeah, those would be, I guess, genuine challenges or, cons, you could say. So those were some pros and cons for solo podcasts. Now getting into the pros and cons, strengths and challenges of interview-based podcasts. So one of the strengths is built-in content variety. You get a fresh perspective each episode. You reduce the content creation burden. It's you inviting and just chatting with someone else who they are the one who's providing the most amount of value. And of course, you have natural topic diversity. Each episode, you're getting someone else with a different perspective who can share those insights with your audience. So those are definitely some strengths when it comes to interview-based shows. Another one is network expansion. So kind of like the inverse of solo shows where you don't really get the network effect as much. When it comes to interview-based podcasts, a lot of my clients, when they have their interviews with industry leaders, it really helps them with their network and helps them with that brand building piece. And just honestly, it's more of a personal thing more than it is a business success thing, which I'll get into what I mean by that later on. But essentially, your personal network will grow and you'll have access to your guest audience if they do promote, which can help you out when it comes to increase in listenership. And of course, you have potential partnership opportunities as well, because if you have a guest onto your podcast and there's alignment between what they do, that relationship can open up a door for so many more things in the future. So again, these are definitely benefits to interview shows. And then finally, enhance credibility markers for my LinkedIn lovers and status chasers. Nothing wrong with it, not hating, I'm just saying. The point being, if you get high-profile guests onto your podcast, it's great, right? It's fantastic. It's great for your ego. It's great for social media. It looks fantastic for you and your brand because you're getting someone who is a well-known leader and industry expert coming onto your podcast, sharing value with your audience. This is definitely a bonus and it adds massively to social proof as well. So those right there are the strengths. But what are some of the challenges? Here are the challenges, right? When it comes to interview-based shows, you really do have a diluted business impact. So if you are an entrepreneur and expert and the primary goal of your podcast is to drive business for your business, you'll find this challenging, very challenging with an interview-based show because you have much lower conversion rates because as you inviting the guests on, they provide the value. Remember the guy on stage at a conference giving the value, then a random host comes on, hey, by the way, guys, work with me. Can you see how that would feel disconnected? And then, of course, what does that lead to? Well, you tell me, right? It'll lead to, again, less control over the key messages being shared on your podcast. Great for diverse opinions, but terrible for you sharing your core message and having that impact your listeners. It's much harder to integrate calls to action because you've spent the last hour building up a guest, and then you share your stuff, feel disconnected. Sharing a spotlight reduces your own authority because you're not the one giving the value to your audience. So that's kind of an L. You then, of course, have more difficulty demonstrating your own methodology. Now, don't get me wrong, you can do this in an interview-based show. It's just way harder. Like, just by nature of how things are set up, it's you trying to extract value from the guest. And then finally, it's you kind of positioning yourself as the student rather than the expert. And if you're trying to generate clients for your business, I think you could probably start to see where disconnect starts to happen when you need to be the expert that people want to learn from. And then, of course, you have the difficulties when it comes to production, right? Scheduling dependency on someone else and their timelines, which can be long sometimes. Technical coordination requirements. They might have a terrible mic, or they might not have the right proper setup to create a high quality sounding podcast. Also, they might just suck as a guest. That does happen sometimes, which can feel like a total waste of time. It's just straight up, right? And then finally, less flexible when it comes to creating timely content. You can't just bell up a guest, like, oh, by the way, this new just came up. Come here now. Let's do this interview. It's going to blow up my podcast. They'll be like, yeah, that's great, but like, you know, I've got a schedule and that's not going to work out for me for XYZ reason. So definitely limitation when it comes to creating more timely content. And like I mentioned, timely content is such an underrated way of you tapping into and broadening your podcast audience. And like I mentioned earlier, you know, like inconsistent episode quality. People don't think about this. If you get a guest on, they could be fantastic and they might be amazing and you might have certain things in place to make sure you don't get crappy guests. They're going to be people who slip through the crack. Slip through the crack, that sounds quite funny, right? Slip through the crack. Anyways, I'm being, I jest. The point is, you know what, you sometimes can find yourself in a spot where you don't create consistently high quality episodes because the guests you're having on aren't consistently high quality. One week they could be incredible. The next week, maybe they're great. The next week they could suck and then they're great again. So it's hard for you to build momentum and consistently deliver high quality content for your audience when the guests you have on, they might be an expert, but it doesn't mean they understand how to create great content for listeners to tune into. Those are two very separate things. A lot of experts out there, and a lot of them aren't great at creating content. They don't get that. Some do, some don't. And if you have an interview-based show, that's just something you have to kind of deal with. Whereas on the flip side, with a solo podcast, it's just you. So as long as you know your stuff, you have complete 100% control of the quality. Now, if you have to think about what that means for your podcast growth, your ability to position yourself as an expert and just the entire experience, well, it means that if someone has a good experience with your podcast and they like your vibe, the next episode, they're going to like your vibe and they're going to keep listening. If they listen to a podcast with a guest that they love, but then the next guest they hate, which sometimes happens, they just don't vibe with them, well, guess what? They're not going to keep listening to the podcast. The other piece of this about this as well is if people are coming primarily for your guests, you're not really building your core fan base. You're just getting your guest fans to come onto your podcast, but it doesn't mean they're going to become your fan. It doesn't work like that, you know? Whereas if it's a solo podcast and people are coming for you, you know the core audience really deeply resonate with your core message and they're coming for you. Now, look, before you go off and get all excited thinking we're done, we're not done. There's still a fair bit to cover in terms of helping you make these decisions. Here are a few things you have to really be careful of when you're making this decision of whether to go with a solo podcast or an interview-based show. So number one, the dangerous comfort-based decision. What does this mean? Right. Imagine you have a talented painter named Sarah, love Sarah, and she was known for creating stunning landscapes. Now, when she decided to teach painting, she naturally created video tutorials showing the entire painting process from start to finish. Because again, for her, she's a painter, she's comfortable painting. So, hey, I'm a painter, I'm comfortable painting, I'm going to just record videos of me painting. Hopefully that'll work. Well, 6 months later, despite her undeniable talent, she had attracted few students. And then a mentor watched her videos and pointed out a problem. You know, your videos show your skill, but they don't demonstrate your teaching ability. Students don't need to see you paint. They already know you're a great painter. They need to see you teach. Pretty straightforward, right? Now, Sarah reluctantly decides, you know what, I'm going to switch things up. I'm going to do a different format. And then she started breaking down her technique step by step, focusing way more on the common student mistakes rather than just displaying her talent. Through this format, which to begin with did feel very unnatural for her, but it clearly demonstrated her teaching ability. And then within months, things turned around and her roster of students was essentially full. Now I'm sharing this because a lot of experts and entrepreneurs of podcasts just go based off what they feel comfortable with. Now, when you're getting started, that's the best thing to do, because again, you want to do whatever feels comfortable. However, just like Sarah, it comes to a point where like, yeah, you're comfortable doing this, but is it getting you the results that you actually want? Like, are you demonstrating through your content that you're the person who's going to help your clients get the best results? Are you sharing your stories, your insights, your methodology, your techniques? Like at that point, it's not really about like what you're comfortable with. It's really more so about, hey, how do I demonstrate my expertise so that my audience would actually want to work with me? So again, don't focus just on what you're comfortable with. Think about what you're legitimately trying to get out of the podcast. The second mistake that people make when it comes to making this decision is what we call copying famous podcast trap and just following industry trends. Now, this one's a pet peeve. This essentially means, and you can see that I'll put like Stephen Bartlett example. The reason why is this: so many podcasts just have an interview-based show because that's what every other podcast does and is. That's it. They like see Stephen Bartlett, right? He's doing a fantastic job. I think he's pretty smug. Again, incredible podcaster. Honestly, incredible podcaster. Great podcast. Just don't like him for whatever reason. There's just something about it. Anyways, I digress. Regardless. Yeah, people like that, right? Or let's say, for example, people see Joe Rogan. Oh, I want to be the next Joe Rogan. Or I want to have a podcast like Chris Williamson. Or whoever it might be, Mel Robbins, whoever it might be. They just see people typically who have interview-based shows, and then they're just massively inspired by that. They start then their own podcast because everyone else has an interview-based show, but they never really stop to think like, what's actually best for me, and what type of show is going to attract the listeners who I want to attract, the audience I want to attract. If you've got a business, the likelihood is you're trying to build your personal brand and attract dream clients to your business. And for that, you really have to think like, do I need to have an interview-based show? Like, is it actually worth me doing that, or is it not? Whereas most people just, again, they just kind of just copy whatever they see, what other people are doing. What's trending right now, let me just do that. Rather than just taking a second to think. And when you take a second to think, you come to way different conclusions. Is what I'm saying making sense? Awesome. So look, successful coaches make podcast format decisions based on their specific business model and their conversion requirements, not industry standards or conventional wisdom. The format that most effectively converts their ideal listeners into customers is the right one for their business, regardless of what other people are doing. So now the question becomes, how can you find the perfect podcast format for your specific situation? Number one, what's your primary business goal for your podcast? Number two, how does your revenue model work? Number one, what's your primary business goal for your podcast? Consider these common coaching business objectives. Number one, is it client acquisition, meaning the podcast primarily is being used as a top of funnel to attract new prospects into your business. That's what we do. That's what our clients do. Number two, is it like a conversion accelerator? So is it designed to nurture existing leads towards purchasing? Number three, is it building your authority? So it's more focused on your look. I want to just establish myself as the go in my industry, like as an authority in my space to make it unquestionable. Number four, is it more about just community development, meaning you just send clients to the podcast to help them out some more? You're building like some movement. Is it like a mission led, you could say, around your coach and your methodology? And then five, is it just content repurposing, right? Will your podcast just serve as a source for other marketing material? For example, myself and my clients, look, if I'm going to sit down and record a podcast, how do I make that podcast into more valuable marketing assets? Is that a LinkedIn post? For us, we turn our podcast content into emails and into guides that can help our prospects on their journey. So the point is essentially like, look, there are a bunch of different objectives you can have for a podcast. What's your objective? Now, the way that this will impact your format choice is this, right? If client acquisition is a primary goal, interviews with well-connected guests can expand your reach. However, if the primary goal is client acquisition, interviews might be great because they make you feel well-connected and might expand your reach. However, if conversion acceleration is your priority, solo episodes that showcases your methodology and create a desire for a specific approach will typically, and when I say typically, basically almost always 100% of the time, will convert at a much higher rate. Coaches focus on authority building might often benefit with like a hybrid approach where you have solo that establishes your unique perspective while having strategic interviews that helps you become more recognized next to an industry leader. So again, you can have both as well. So ask yourself the question, when a perfect fit client discovers my podcast, what specific action do I want them to take next? And the format that best facilitates this action is often your ideal starting point. Question number 2. How does your revenue model work? No one coaching business is the same or their pricing and packaging, but here are some variations, right? You have high ticket coaching, one-on-one, that's premium pricing, 3 to 10K plus per packages, limited client capacity. Is it group coaching programs where it's moderate pricing, scalable client capacity? Is it more membership model where it's like lower pricing but high scalable model? Is it more digital products where it's like variable pricing and then completely scalable because it's not just you attach, you're just selling a digital product? Or is it hybrid revenue, so a combination of multiple models? Now, how this actually impacts the format choice. So let's think about this. High ticket coaches typically benefit most from solo episodes that deeply demonstrates their expertise and creates a desire for personalized attention, which again, it makes a lot of sense, right? If you have a one-on-one coaching program, you'd like to think that you can demonstrate your ability to coach people through your podcast. And if you can, it's a great way for you to build a desire for someone to want to work with you on a one-on-one basis. So the conversion math is pretty simple. If you just have one high ticket client that comes from your episode that can justify 10 solo episodes, just one client. If you've got 3, if you're making 3 to 10K and just one episode lands that's like, that's 5K, 10K. Some of our clients are making like 30K. We're making $12,000, $15,000 per month with our show. So it's definitely worth it. And that's per month, right? Conversely, when it comes to membership and calls-based coaches, they often find that interviews can be more valuable. And there's a much broader reach and wider appeal. And really for them, it's not about like the right audience when in personalized guidance, it's more like volume. So ask yourself the question, given your price point and the capacity and constraints of your own business, how many new clients do you need each month to consider the podcast successful? So if you need like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, well, you have to think about a different approach of growing your audience or what format to have. Whereas if you just need one few clients and it's more personalized, then solo podcast is a very clear choice here. So look, there you have it. Now you have the pros and you have the cons of interview-based shows versus solo podcasts. Now, I haven't told you what to do because I think it's best that you make the decision for yourself. But what I will do is I'll share with you what our clients do and what we found to work for ourselves. So look, like I mentioned, our clients' primary objective is to use the podcast to drive more business for their business. So if you find yourself in a spot where, you were doing interviews, but you're not generating clients and you want to build your personal brand and attract dream clients to your business, doing a solo podcast and prioritizing that over interviews will get you more sales and will get you way more leads for your business. It just will. And that's what our clients do. And that's what we do. We prioritize solo podcast episodes. Now, some clients will prioritize solo and still have some interviews for a variation here or there, but they prioritize solo episodes. None of my clients solely do interview-based shows. They don't prioritize interview-based shows. It just doesn't work because for them, they're trying to generate business, not give someone else business. So there you have it. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment down below, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.